Thank you, Chase, for kind words, and Principal Thompson for the invitation and opportunity to be here, and for cooling the room so well. As we think of what it may mean to warm heart and body, imagine yourself in ancient Israel, in the tent gathered around the fire. What would we do to encourage and warm each other? We would tell stories of heroes past. And for that reason, let me take you to Judges chapter 7. So Judges chapter 7. Through the week with the students and the pastors who were here, I did Daniel 6 yesterday. It just seemed, both by time and subject, perhaps better in the student context. And as we talk about the real hero of Scripture today, it seemed like it might be better to start with a flawed hero in Judges chapter 7 today. You'll recognize that we turn to the life of Gideon, to the portion that we like including in the Sunday school material, and that means it's the sanitized portion of Gideon's life, and we will read the full story a little bit later, but let's at least get the hero story in front of us as we understand what God may be doing for the gospel's sake in the full story of Gideon. Judges chapter 7, verse 1. Then Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all the peoples who were with him rose early and encamped beside the spring of Harod, and the camp of Midian was north of them by the hill of Moriah in the valley. The Lord said to Gideon, "The people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel boast over me, saying, 'My own hand has saved me.' Now therefore proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, 'Whoever is fearful and trembling, let him return home and hurry away from Mount Gilead.' Then 22,000 of the people returned, and 10,000 remained. And the Lord said to Gideon, 'The people are still too many. Take them down to the water, and I will test them for you there, and anyone of whom I say to you, this one shall go with you, shall go with you. And anyone of whom I say to you, this one shall not go with you, shall not go.' So he brought the people down to the water. And the Lord said to Gideon, 'Everyone who laps the water with his tongue as a dog laps, you shall set him by himself. Likewise, everyone who kneels down to drink.' And the number of those who lapped, putting their hands to their mouths, was 300 men. But all the rest of the people knelt down to drink water. And the Lord said to Gideon, 'With the 300 men who lapped, I will save you, and give the Midianites into your hand, and let all the others go, every man to his own home.' So the people took provisions in their hands and their trumpets, and he sent all the rest of Israel, every man to his tent, but retained the 300 men, and the camp of Midian was below him in the valley." Some interlude as the battle is prepared. Let's enter the battle as we on to verse 16. "And he, that is Gideon, divided the 300 men into 3 companies and put trumpets in the hands of all of them and empty jars with torches inside the jars. And he said to them, 'Look at me and do likewise. When I come to the outskirts of the camp, do as I do. When I blow the trumpet, I and all who are with me, then blow the trumpets also on every side of all the camp and shout, for the Lord and for Gideon.' So Gideon and the 100 men who were with him came to the outskirts of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, when they had just set the watch. And they blew the trumpets and smashed the jars that were in their hands. Then the 3 companies blew the trumpets and broke the jars. They held in their left hands the torches, and in their right hands the trumpets to blow. And they cried out, 'A sword for the Lord and for Gideon.' Every man stood in his place around the camp, and all the army ran. They cried and fled. When they blew the 300 trumpets, the Lord set every man's sword against his comrade and against all the army, and the army fled as far as Bethshittah towards Zererah, as far as the border of Abel-Meholah by Tabbath." And we'll end there for now. Let's pray together. Father, we would see the gospel of your provision in this text, as in all the word your Son declared it would be. And yet we recognize, even as in this flawed hero, there is much that we might seek to claim of ourselves and even boast before you if we are not careful with your word. So guide us, we pray, by the same Spirit that gave the word, that you would apply to our hearts the truth that you intend. This we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. In the book Mourning, as in grieving, mourning into dancing, Walter Rangren tells the story of a single mother named Gloria who is grieving. When she was a child, an uncle, the only man who was a father figure in her life, left to go to war. And as a child, she was terrified. So before the uncle left, he put a nickel into her hand, and he said, "Gloria, if you will take this nickel and put it in your penny purse and never lose it, I promise you, I'll come back for it." She did not lose the nickel, and the uncle came back from war. But that was now long ago. More recently, the uncle has passed away. And one night, Gloria dreams a dream. She dreams that the uncle comes back and says, "Gloria, if you can find the nickel, I'll come back again." She finds the nickel. He does not come back. And as the reality of his passing settles over her, so does depression and listlessness and uselessness. So much so it begins to affect her son, who stops attending school, hangs with the delinquents, and for reasons he himself cannot explain, one day punches out the screen on the back door of the apartment. The preacher comes over, helps the boy put the screen back in, and goes to talk to Gloria, who sits in the living room on a sofa like a child in the principal's office with her head down, ready to be scolded. He tries to talk to her, but she does not seem, even as she listens, to hear what he says. And finally, to reach out to her, he actually reaches forward and touches her forearm just with that pastoral touch and says to her, "Gloria, Gloria, listen to me. Jesus still loves you. Jesus loves you." Now, I know the words seem simple and perhaps naive, but you have to question the reality of their truth and the reason for their truth. After all, she is totally useless, not just to her son, not just to her ministry, to herself. The depression, the lack of purpose has overwhelmed her. And here is somebody saying to her that despite her uselessness, the Lord who saved her still loves her. To make sense of that, we actually need to connect Gideon and Gloria and understand that God truly does use the useless. You won't perceive the uselessness of Gideon if you only start in the 7th chapter of Judges, because it's not where we're introduced to him. We're introduced in the 6th chapter, where at the very beginning, we are told something of the destitution of Israel. And then in the 11th verse of the 6th chapter, the angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, while his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor." Now, you are supposed to get the irony here. You thresh wheat out in the open so that the chaff will blow away. You tread wine in an enclosed wine press so the wind won't blow the dirt into your wine. The fact that he is threshing wheat in a wine press means precisely that he is hiding because he is afraid. And yet it is this afraid thresher of wheat in a wine press that God will use to be one of Israel's greatest heroes. After underscoring again and again how his fear that is so obvious should make him useless to God. After all, when the angel of the Lord says, "The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor," as he is hiding in the winepress, it's a little bit like saying to a kid who is flipping hamburgers in McDonald's, "Greetings, great chef." The situation belies the title. And not only is the fear obvious, it becomes offensive. Verse 13, Gideon said to the angel of the Lord, "Please, sir, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all his wonderful deeds that our fathers recounted to us, saying, 'Did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt?'" I've read the Sunday school bulletins. I know that God, once upon a time, is supposed to have delivered our fathers from Egypt and slavery and the enemies in the desert. But the Midianites are here. The Lord is with us. If the Lord is with us, why is all this happening to us? And if that sounds offensive, you think of what the people in our church feel when we stand in the pulpit and say to them, "The Lord is with you." Really? Then why does my daughter have leukemia? The Lord is with me? Why do I have to endure the same boss day after day after day who belittles me and makes me feel like a nothing? The Lord is with me? Tell it to the children. I live in the real world. I've read the stories too. How in the world is God with me? And the obvious fear comes now in offensive questions that even turn into the accusation of God. The end of verse 13. "But now the Lord has forsaken us and given us into the hand of Midian." It's not just that I'm experiencing difficulty. It's his fault. You tell me he's in charge of all things? You tell me he's sovereign? Then who is to blame for what I'm facing? Well, it's obvious. Your theology traps you. The God of Gideon clearly has to be blamed, and Gideon is willing to blame him as his fear now begins to drive accusation. It does more than that for this great hero of Israel. The fear is not only obvious and offensive, it leads to evasion as well. Verse 15. After the Lord turns to him in verse 14 and says, "Go in the might of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Do not I send you? I, the representative of God, am sending you. Why should you be afraid?" And verse 15, Gideon said to him, "Please, Lord, how can I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." Translation, "Here am I, send somebody else." This is your hero? And the fear that is in evidence now begins to show itself over and over and over in the account of Gideon. Verse 17, the first real sign of the wrongness of this hero. "And he, that is Gideon, said to the angel of the Lord, 'If now I have found favor in your eyes, then show me a sign that it is you who speak to me.'" What did Jesus say about those who ask for a sign? It is a wicked and adulterous generation that asks for a sign. And yet, it is precisely what Gideon does. Curiously enough, the angel of the Lord answers. Verse 20, the angel of God said to him, "Take the meat and the unleavened cakes and put them on this rock and pour the broth over them." And he did so. Then the angel of the Lord reached out the tip of the staff that was in his hand and touched the meat and the unleavened cakes. And the fire sprang up from the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened bread, and the angel of the Lord vanished from his sight. You want a sign? Put your lunch on the rock. And the fire springs up and consumes the lunch, and the angel of the Lord, poof, disappears. Pretty good sign. It will not be enough. The warm-up for the great battle needs to happen, and so the angel of the Lord gives a little instruction for Gideon to prepare him to be the hero that he is supposed to be. And so in verse 25, that night the Lord said to Gideon, take your father's bull, and the second bull, 7 years old, and pull down the altar of Baal that your father has, and cut down the Asherah that is beside it. You want to get ready to go up against 135,000 Midianites, first go to your daddy's backyard and take down the altar that's there to an idol. Verse 27, so Gideon took 10 men of his servants and did as the Lord told him, but because he was afraid of his family and the men of the town, he did it by night. Don't want anybody to know, you know. I might get in trouble. People might get mad. I might get hurt. Daddy might get upset. And so the hero of Israel does it at night with 10 men because he is afraid. By verse 33, the Midianites and the Amalekites and the people of the east come together, cross the Jordan. The great threat is now apparent. But Gideon gathers himself, or at least the Spirit of the Lord does in verse 34. The Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon. He sounded the trumpet, and the Abiezrites were called out to follow him. Finally, a little gumption, a little backbone. He's ready to go up against the enemies of God as he has been called, almost ready. He just needs one more sign. Verse 35. Then Gideon said to God, if you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said. Now just think of what he just said to God. God, if you will do as you said. Behold, I'm laying a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. If there's dew on the fleece alone, and it is dry on the ground, then I shall know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said. Okay, Lord, first thing, before I go to battle, I want you to put dew on the fleece, but keep the ground dry. And the next morning, what does he discover? Just what he asked. God provides the sign again. Well, finally, now we're ready for battle. Lord, would you do it again? But this time do it in reverse. Then I'll really trust you, finally, really, truly. What do you discover about the hero Gideon? But that his fear, which is obvious and offensive and appears over and over again, should make him useless to God, and yet God keeps using him and calling him and equipping him and enabling him far beyond what his own abilities should allow. I've made much of the fear of Gideon. You've heard it in my voice as well as in the account. But I want you to hear me say clearly, the reason we all need to make much of the fear of Gideon, including me, is because I so much identify with it. You cannot be in pastoral ministry. You cannot be in church service. You cannot be in the position of being held responsible for other people's opinions and affections and destinies without recognizing fear. Some years ago now, soon after I had become the president at Covenant Seminary, I got a call from a man who is high-ranking in our denomination. We were involved, as churches sometimes are wont to do, in a battle. I know that's only in Presbyterian circles. I know nobody else experiences doctrinal dispute. But we were in a doctrinal dispute, and this man called me, and on the phone he said to me, Bryan, I don't want you to get hurt. And I don't want your family to get hurt. And I don't want your school to get hurt. So this is how I think you ought to handle this. Now, it was said warmly and cordially, but I knew precisely what was happening. He was threatening me. And I'm young enough and brash enough as a new president to think to myself, you don't scare me. I face bigger fish than you. I can handle this. Now, when he called, it was about the middle of the day. By the end of the day, I was getting on a plane to go to Israel to lead a tour. It's a long plane ride to Israel. You have a lot of time to think. And I began to wonder, could he hurt me? Could he hurt my school? Could he hurt my family? And I got afraid. It is my surmise that most of you know fear too, even in doing the work of the Lord. The chief elder, the predominant family, the issue that you cannot control, the finances that you cannot manipulate, puts us positioned over and over again to wonder what the God who says he is with us is going to do, and why, if he's here, we are struggling as we are. We do know fear. I will tell you what actually came to my mind in that time. And it was just the faithfulness of a Sunday school teacher from years and years before, that in the lack of wisdom in my church, the church had assigned the single senior elderly secretary of the pastor to teach the Sunday school class of the junior high boys. And one day in frustration, as she was teaching us the 91st Psalm, she simply said, boys, you must listen to me. Because as this psalm is teaching you how to handle fear, God has one simple message. Even when you are afraid, God is with you. And here I was, an adult now, decades later, and the words came to me again. Even when you are afraid, God is with you. What's the message of Gideon? Even when he was afraid, should be useless to God, God was still with him. Our fears do not drive God away or make us useless to him. As we acknowledge them, even as the scriptures were willing to do for this Gideon, we recognize our fears do not disqualify us. I'm not telling you the problem will go away. I'm not telling you the issue, the threat is going to disappear. For the moment, I only want you to hear me say, even when you are afraid, God is with you. And you are not disqualified from his service because you are afraid, nor if you are particularly frail. Which is also what we should perceive about the nature of this Gideon hero. If you move into that hero chapter, the one that, of course, we want our children to read, we now, having had the background, begin to recognize there is more going on than fear in the preparation of this Gideon. Verse 2 of chapter 7, the Lord said to Gideon, the people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel boast over me, saying, my own hand has saved me. Now therefore proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, whoever is fearful and trembling, let him return home and hurry away. Can you actually picture Gideon at this moment? If you're afraid, you can go home. Lord, can I go home? Because he is clearly afraid. His frailty is not just in his fear. His frailty is evident in his followers. You know the story of the sifting of the men till you get from the 32,000 to 300. But it's interesting to even think about that. 300 men, who were the noble 300? Now, of course, maybe like a lot of you in the room, I've been in Sunday school since I was a little kid, so I have a certain view of the noble 300. These are the guys in the white hats. These are the noble ones. These are the great warriors. And if you were taught like I was, because I'm caught on the microphones here, I can't show you, so let's just say, right? If you were taught years ago, who are the 300? These are clearly the best soldiers, right? These are the ones who, what are they doing? If they are lapping with their hands to their mouths like a dog, why are they chosen? Because as they are lapping with their hands to their mouths, what are they doing with their eyes? What were you taught in Sunday school? You're doing it right now. What are they doing? They are looking around. These are the vigilant ones. These are the ones who are still paying attention. These are the ones who are being sharp and ready for action. These are the noble 300. Now, do you remember I told you I was on that plane going to Israel? On that trip to Israel, we ended up at the Spring of Herod, at Gideon's Spring. And it was interesting to hear the Israeli guide discuss the 300 men. And her explanation was this. Now listen, which 300 would you have wanted? Would you have wanted the soldiers who are so lazy that while everyone else has been preparing for battle and is absolutely worn out and just needs water so bad that they just fall on their faces in the water because they're so exhausted from preparing for battle? Or would you want the ones who are so obviously not helping to get ready that they're just kind of going, I don't need much water. They just kind of lap. Now, the point she was trying to make was Gideon didn't get the good soldiers, he got the bad soldiers. Now, I must tell you, I don't think you can prove it either way. You know what I think you can prove? You don't expect to go up against 135,000 with 300 and win. It's too frail. It's not just the frailty of the leader, it is the frailty of the soldiers, even of their weapons. I mean, after all, what are the chief weapons here? But trumpets and broken pitchers that have a little light on the inside. Some of you may remember that in Pilgrim's Progress, when Christian finally gets to the celestial city, he's given a tour. And when he is given a tour by the spokesman for God, he's taken actually to the storehouse of the weaponry of God. And when he gets into the storehouse, he sees what are the weapons that God uses for the great victories. Do you remember what is in the storehouse of the weaponry of God? Trumpets and broken pots. The useless things that God uses to display his own glory. Why do we need Gideon? Not just so that we will think, all right, if I just straighten up and handle my fear and deal with everything, that, if I can just kind of manage everything, then God will bless my management process. No, we're to understand God is using those totally useless, not just by their fear, but by their frailty. They can't handle the problem. It's beyond them. And yet those whom God is using can be used despite their frailty. In the mid-90s, one of the vice presidents from our school had the opportunity to actually have an audience with the Chinese premier, Jiang Zemin, at a time that you may remember Christians were under great persecution in China. And as that small cadre of evangelicals had audience with Jiang Zemin, one of the things they said was, we have here a Gospel of John. We would like to give it to you as a gift. Would you receive it? And Jiang Zemin said, yes. In honor of my nanny when I was a child, who was a Christian. She was a Canadian single nurse who wanted to be a missionary to China, but did not qualify for the mission organizations that she wanted. And so she still got to China by being a nanny to a wealthy family in China, and cared for the future premier, not knowing it would happen, feeling that she had failed. to be the missionary she wanted to be. Some of you know that under Jean Zeman, despite the persecution, Christianity began to flower, and the persecution eased significantly in the late 90s. Now, I can't tell you the direct cause of that or why, but as I think of a group of academics who are dealing with the premier of China, and they're handing him a book of John, and he says he will read it because he wants to honor his Canadian nanny, I think, what was God doing? As we think of the millions and millions of conversions that have happened in China in the last 2 decades, was God using a failed Canadian nurse, far beyond her imagining, in all of her frailty, just one, who perhaps became responsible for the conversion of millions in God's plan of life to touch life, to touch life, to touch life, to touch life? It was only 300. It may have been the worst 300, but it was still the great victory of God as he used the frail and the fearful to overcome his enemies. The story doesn't reach its climax until we get to chapter 8, in which we get the postlude, as it were, of the great battle. Gideon has won. You know the story. In chapter 8 and verse 22, the men of Israel said to Gideon, "Rule over us, you and your son and your grandson also, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian." Gideon said to them, "I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." Well, isn't that noble and fine? There is a little crack we should see in the account. No. Don't make me king. No. Only the Lord should be your king. It sounds so great. Because Gideon says not only should he not be the king, but his son should not be the king. Anybody remember what Gideon would name his son? It's actually in the account, down in verse 31. "And his concubine, who was in Shechem, also bore him a son, and called his name Abimelech." All Hebrew scholars, Abimelech means what? My father is the king. No. Don't make me your king. Only the Lord should be your king. By the way, have you met my son? His name is, my father is the king. And how does Gideon effect his rule over these people? Verse 24, Gideon said to these men, "Let me make a request of you. Every one of you give me the earrings from his spoil." For they had golden earrings because they were Ishmaelites, the ones who had been defeated. And they answered, "We'll willingly give them." And the men spread a cloak, and every man threw in it the earrings of his spoil, and the weight of the golden earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold. I don't know what that is in kilos. It's 43 pounds of gold. What did Gideon do with the gold? Anybody remember? This great man of God who's been given this unlikely victory by Jehovah. What does Gideon, the faithful warrior of God, the mighty man of valor, now do with the gold? Verse 27. "And Gideon made an ephod of it," which is a vestment for divination, "and put it in his city in Ophrah. And all Israel whored after it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and to his family." Oh my. I don't want to put that in the Sunday school material. The fearful and frail hero is more flawed than we ever want to talk about. Though he would make it to the Hall of Heroes in the book of Heroes, in the book of Hebrews, we recognize that at the same time, he became an idolater, even by the spoil of the very victory that God had given him. And he used it to control the people of God, to lead them into prostitution away from the very God who had delivered them, just so that he and his family could have power in Israel. Now, if you're God, what are you going to do to Gideon? You've given the great victory. You have provided a use for this useless man whose fears and frailties and flaws are so much on display. And what does he do? He makes an idol of that. What would you do? Well, we're told what happens to Gideon, verse 28 in chapter 8. So Midian was subdued before the people of Israel, and they raised their heads no more, and the land had rest 40 years in the days of Gideon. Okay, well, the land, but what did God do to Gideon himself? Verse 29. Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, went and lived in his own house, had 70 sons, his own offspring, for he had many wives. Verse 32, and Gideon, the son of Joash, died in a good old age and was buried in the tomb of Joash, his father, at Ophrah of the Abiezrites. Now, wait a second. Is there another chapter? Where's the lightning bolt? God's got to do something to this man. Now, you and I should recognize there are consequences, right? It became a snare to Gideon and to his family. And you may remember the family went into ruin after this example. But for Gideon himself, there is rest and peace and prosperity and a good old age. What are we to make of this? But that God is entirely undoing the math of our religion. What we want to say is, you qualify, you measure up, you straighten up, you fly right, you get good enough, and God will bless you, favor you, and make you his own. And here we see a God who is with a man who is fearful, frail, and flawed, and deserves none of what God is providing him. So that we will learn something. That God uses the useless and provides for people who cannot provide for themselves. And it is a God of grace beyond our imagining. So that the gracious character of God is on display for people who will desperately need it, who are more like Gideon than they ever want to acknowledge, and will need a Savior as much as Gideon did. Why do we need Gideon? Because of our fears and our frailty and our flaws. We need to know of a God who provides for people who cannot provide for themselves. For those of you who were with me in chapel earlier in the week, I told just a little bit of a story, and I ask you to imagine it again. Imagine a middle-aged man with an 8-year-old mind in a jail cell in a southern state of the United States. He's in a jail cell for true crime, but because he has an 8-year-old mind in this holding cell, he is an absolute terror of the other criminals who are in the cell with him, more sophisticated and more hardened. And so he goes to a corner and he trembles and weeps in his terror. Until another man in the jail cell, probably there on drug charges, goes to the middle-aged man with the 8-year-old mind and says to him, I do not know what you have to face, but if you will trust in Jesus Christ, he will be with you in whatever you have to face. And the middle-aged man with the 8-year-old mind received the gospel from a man in the jail cell who was totally useless, you would think, for God's purposes, and led that man to the Lord. The reason I know that is the middle-aged man with the 8-year-old mind is my brother. And as I think of the man that led him to the Lord, who would have been an embarrassment to his Sunday school teacher and his church, I praise God that he is able to use the useless. I rejoiced when I got the letter from my brother, who will be in jail for many years. And he said, Bryan, this is what I now believe. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. It's not just because of what my brother said he now believed. I did not know he could write. All of his life he has spoken to me and to his siblings in single syllables and grunts. And here he was now writing of his faith. And he began to write to me and to his other siblings of the courses that he was learning in the chapel in the prison as he was affirming his faith. And as we were rejoicing that he was embracing a Savior, and I had to recognize here this seminary president had never been able to get through to him. But somebody who would have been useless in the life of the church as we perceive it, God used to bring a soul to eternity. And that wasn't the end of the story. My parents, by that time, in part because of the pressures of my out-of-control younger brother, had been separated for 15 years. And as my brother became a believer in prison, he wrote to me one day and said, Bryan, I'm going to begin to pray for Mom and Dad to get back together. And inside I'm going, oh no, Jeff, don't do that. That won't work. I know that. I'm mature. I'm an adult. I'm a realist. That's not going to work. About a year later, my oldest daughter was getting married. I got a call from my mother. I'm coming to the wedding. Great. I'm coming with your father. Great. We're going to drive together. I don't want to be in the car, but great that you all are coming together. And we're staying in the same hotel. Okay. And we're staying in the same room. Mom? Are things better between you and Dad? She said, it's not a scandal. Remember, we never got divorced. But because of the difficulties of your brother, your father and I have learned to lean on each other again. And before my father passed away, I would tell you that he and my mother would visit my brother in prison. And I would be with them once or twice a year as they would hold hands, walking through barbed wire to visit my brother in prison in the absolute best years of their marriage and their faith that they ever had. And I think of my brother with his 8-year-old mind in prison praying for my parents to get back together. Totally undeserving, frail, fearful, useless. And God using him. When I doubted that it could happen, did not believe it could happen. I say to people, this is my own life, and I have trouble believing it actually happened. Because the gospel is real. And it is powerful, even for those who are useless, as the God of Gideon and Gloria and Jeff and Bryan and my parents is alive and real and powerful and gracious beyond our deserving and our understanding. Praise God for the gospel and the Savior who saves us in our uselessness and tells us about Gideon. So Gloria's and we will have hope again. Praise God for the gospel. May he give us strength again to believe it, the strength that he alone can give. Father, would you unite our hearts in the purpose you give us, so that even if in our lives right now we face fears, if we know we're incapable because of our frailty, if we know our flaws, our own sin and waywardness, and believe that we should not be used by you, could not be used by you, could not be rescued, that you would restore in our hearts the hope of the gospel. It is real and it is powerful. It is transformative. Give us the joy of our salvation and the strength that comes from it, that we might be the instruments of the gospel for Christ's sake, in whose name we pray. Amen.